Why does being constantly self-aware feel less free than when I wasn't trying to be aware at all? Because what used to happen on its own is now under constant scrutiny. The very moment you try to maintain your awareness, it's like a manager shows up in the mind. That guy looks for ways to make everything more efficient everywhere. And that will inevitably add hardship, because life now includes a second layer that keeps score. Initially, attention moved where it needed to move, but now that this second layer has appeared, that isn't an option anymore. Once you decide you should be aware all the time, awareness gets confused with control. You start tracking everything from thoughts to emotions, and the body and mind feel that. Of course they do. And as you can probably attest from your own life, if someone is constantly watched, they start to behave rather erratically. And so it turns out that ignorance very often feels like bliss in hindsight, because there used to be no internal commentary about how things should be. It was just how it worked without self-audit. Bliss is not what ignorance gave you. Relief is what you notice after it is gone. The relief came from not having an extra task. Just look at how people use fitness trackers today. Many start by enjoying walks or workouts, but eventually that isn't enough anymore. Everything from steps to sleep must be tracked meticulously. It has to register correctly. In studies, people report guilt for missing targets and anxiety about numbers. But what changed? It certainly wasn't the walk, just that there is now an added observer. So, what if we just stop with the self-awareness? Well, first of all, that rarely, if ever, actually works. For you see, trying keeps the manager in charge. Effort won't help you here. The exit happens when awareness is no longer treated as a duty. Awareness works fine when it is allowed to show up without being measured. A practical step is to notice when awareness turns into commentary. The commentary is the problem, not awareness itself. You need to stop supervising the noticing. When attention is allowed to move without instruction, the sense of freedom returns on its own. In a manipulated world, is any experience really mine? Manipulation shapes the menu, not the eating. Advertising, algorithms, political messaging, and influencer culture strongly affect what shows up in front of you and what gets reinforced. They influence preferences and most of the attention. They do not, however, experience the moment for you. Sensation and emotion still occur where you are. No system can substitute itself for your true being. The confusion usually comes from mixing origin with ownership. An impulse may be planted or sometimes even amplified from outside. Yet, the felt experience of wanting, enjoying, regretting, or resisting happens internally and cannot be outsourced. Even when desire is a part of conditioning, the impact of that desire is immediate and personal. You cannot hand that off to a brand or platform. What gets lost in heavy manipulation is authorship. People feel robbed because they assume an experience only counts if it was independently chosen by them and them alone. That creates alienation. Experience does not require purity to be real. The only thing needed is presence. If you tasted the drink, felt the disappointment, or laughed at some video, that happened. No campaign can reverse that fact. Want an example? Think of social media outrage cycles or shitstorms. A headline is engineered to provoke anger, commonly known as rage bait. Thousands react on cue. Many later say, "That wasn't even my opinion." Still, the anger was felt and the blood started boiling. Fingers typed while the body paid the cost. Dismissing it as fake avoids responsibility for what actually happened. Seeing it as yours allows learning from it. This matters practically because rejecting ownership keeps manipulation effective. When people say, "None of this is really me," they remain passive. But when they say, "This reaction happened here," discernment improves. You start noticing patterns in how attention is pulled towards something and how moods change. That noticing requires honesty about impact on yourself. Don't try to purify experience to make it holy. Acknowledge what affects you and how. Manipulation tends to be less effective when its effects are seen clearly without dramatizing them. The experience does not need to be defended as authentic or rejected as artificial. It simply needs to be recognized. If everything is predetermined, why does the urge to manage my life feel so exhausting and so necessary at the same time? Managing your life feels so tiring because it's like swimming upstream, since whatever it is that's producing thoughts also produces responsibility signals. It feels necessary at the same time. Both show up together. There is no contradiction once you see their different roles. Predetermination does not remove the sensation of choice. The body and mind are built to anticipate outcomes and correct course accordingly. That will keep running whether outcomes are fixed or not. When you believe you are personally responsible for steering everything, that will turn into chronic strain. It keeps scanning for errors that were never actually under your control. The exhaustion comes from ownership. Planning, responding, deciding, and adjusting happen anyway. What drains energy is the added belief that you must guarantee results. That belief adds nothing. What it does create, though, is second-guessing and eventually regret. And as you probably guessed, none of that improves the next moment. At the same time, the urge feels necessary because without it, the mind predicts the end of all things. It just assumes that if we stop to manage everything, the inevitable outcome will be chaos. This is a survival reflex. The mind works like any government in that aspect, wanting to sell you the ludicrous idea that control equals safety. In that regard, it doesn't even matter whether that control is real. It only checks whether the effort is continuous. A clear example is burnout in modern work culture. Many professionals know intellectually that promotions, layoffs, and all the other stuff are outside their control. Still, they overmanage every detail, feeling trapped between knowing the limits of control and fearing the cost of letting go. The exhaustion comes from carrying responsibility for forces larger than their role. The necessity feeling comes from fear conditioning, not from actual requirements of the job. Even if everything is predetermined, passivity should not be the obvious outcome. Actions and decisions still occur. The difference is whether they are followed by self-prosecution. When management drops its claim of authorship, behavior becomes simpler. You still pay bills, set reminders, show up, and respond. You just stop adding the narrative that your worth or future depends on flawless execution. A practical test is to notice how often management happens after the fact. None of that changes outcomes. It only reinforces the belief that you were in charge. So you see, there is no need to convince yourself that nothing matters. Just start seeing that life does not require a personal supervisor. It runs with or without it. If nothing is truly separate, why does isolation feel so physically real in the body? Isolation feels like that because the body is built to register connection as a survival condition. The body runs on different patterns and threat detection. So when those systems register reduced contact, they automatically lower the feeling of safety. The nervous system evolved in groups where separation often meant injury or death. That wiring did not disappear because an insight appeared. When contact decreases, the body reacts in all the ways that we connect with loneliness. That can be, but is not limited to, a feeling of heaviness or a heaving pressure in the chest. Even fatigue may be a symptom. These are regulatory responses, not just thoughts. The body is not trying to make a statement about reality. It is simply responding to data. Isolation also becomes physical because the sense of self is stabilized through interaction. Facial feedback, voice tone, timing, shared attention. These regulate hormones. When that feedback weakens, the system loses reference points. The body experiences this as disorientation, which is quite uncomfortable. This discomfort is interpreted as loneliness. This explains why isolation can hurt even when you know intellectually that separation is not absolute. Understanding does not override physiology. A calm explanation does not supply oxytocin. Insight does not replace co-regulation. Expecting it to do so creates confusion and self-blame. Just take a moment and think about remote work and its implication. Many people report physical symptoms despite liking their jobs and understanding the benefits. Low energy and sleep issues are just two of the symptoms. The thing is, though, that they are not lacking perspective. They are missing contact with other human beings, even if it's just about hallway chats and unplanned laughter. The body reads the absence as withdrawal of support, even when work performance stays high. Another thing is the idea that attention turns inward when isolation shows up. Sensations amplify, and the body becomes the one and only reference point. Without external grounding, internal signals repeat indefinitely. This can intensify the sense of being cut off. The repetition reinforces itself until interrupted by contact or engagement. None of this contradicts non-separation. It explains why the body still reacts as if separation matters. The mistake is treating bodily isolation as a personal failure or a misunderstanding that should not exist. It is neither. It is simply another response. What helps is addressing isolation where it exists. That could be in the body or eye contact with strangers and friends alike. Even brief exchanges recalibrate the system. You do not need to solve the meaning of isolation. Just respond to the conditions producing it. Is loneliness a signal that something is missing, or that I've been trained to expect something that never existed? Loneliness is not one thing per se. It points to two different conditions that often get mixed together. Sometimes loneliness signals an unmet need. Humans are shaped through interaction and being responded to affect mood, sleep, appetite, and motivation. When these are missing for long periods of time, the body eventually shows some signs. So in this case, loneliness is information. It says contact has thinned beyond what this body tolerates. Other times, loneliness comes from expectation. Modern culture trains people to expect constant emotional availability and effortless connection. Social media and romantic narratives quietly promise that the right people will make you feel continuously seen. But guess what? That promise was never realistic. When ordinary human contact fails to deliver that level of reassurance, loneliness appears even in big crowds. The confusion happens because both feel the same. And since the feeling alone does not tell you which condition is present, you will have to look at context. Look at people who text all day but feel lonely at night. The rate of interaction is nearly constant. The sense of contact, however, is rather low. This happens because interaction has been shaped into performance. Quick replies, curated reactions, and constant comparison raise expectations while satisfaction lowers. The proverbial quick fix that doesn't last. The result is loneliness that no amount of doom scrolling fixes, hence why it's called doom scrolling in the first place. There is also a learnt habit of turning loneliness into a personal diagnosis. People assume it means something is wrong with them or their life choices. It turns a temporary state into an identity. That training comes from self-improvement culture. Practically, the distinction matters. If loneliness gets easier after simple contact or interaction, then something tangible was missing. If it persists even with regular interaction, expectations are likely doing the damage. In that case, chasing deeper connection often worsens the feeling because it keeps attention on what should be happening instead of what is happening. Loneliness only requires an honest look at what is happening around you. Sometimes the answer is more contact. Sometimes it is less fantasy about what contact should provide. Treating both as the same keeps people stuck. Why does the desire for connection feel urgent, while actual connection often feels underwhelming? The body experiences internal discomfort and assigns connection as the fastest imagined relief. That urgency is about wanting the sensation to change. When discomfort is present, the mind compresses time and frames connection as something that must happen soon. That creates discomfort before anything actually occurs. When connection finally does happen, it often feels underwhelming because it never had the power that was assigned to it in the first place. Another person can share space and conversation, but they cannot remove the uneasiness that created the urgency. The original stress belonged to the body, not to the absence of contact. When the interaction does not erase that tension, the contrast shows up as disappointment. There is also a mismatch between what is desired and what is possible. The desire is vague and total. It wants total and complete ease. Actual connection, however, is concrete and partial. It has limits. No real interaction can satisfy a desire that was never clearly defined in the first place. Just think of the time you really looked forward to a party. The anticipation is strong. The evening happens. Conversation is casual. People joke, eat, and then leave. On the way home, the restlessness is still there. The conclusion is that the gathering was empty. In reality, the gathering did exactly what gatherings do. It provided company. It just did not resolve your own expectations that developed independently of it. Connection feels better when it is not treated as medicine. When it is allowed to be simple contact rather than a fix, satisfaction increases. It's not the connection that disappoints. The problem is that urgency assigns it a task it cannot complete. If what was said here resonated in any way, you may feel like looking a little deeper. We've put together a digital retreat that is built to bring you into direct contact with the clarity that's already here, through carefully designed meditations, teachings, and simple pointers that remove the unnecessary effort around this whole subject. It's made for people who want something real. We also have a Christmas promotion running right now. It gives you access to the retreat at a special holiday offer, which makes it easier to step into this without hesitation. If that sounds like something worth exploring, the link is in the description. And if you prefer to listen to our videos without music, you can find them on Patreon.